Hey guys, a little bit of a quicker and a little bit of a less formal video today. I don't actually have a script that I'm reading off. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the French presidential election. I'm going to ramble a little bit. Hopefully it isn't too incoherent. Hopefully it's still watchable, but just let me know if it is rather crap in the comments down below. So the French presidential election is all starting to kick off. Now, firstly, the election there in France doesn't work like it does in most countries. It's not like the US at all. There is a first round with loads of different candidates, and then that's narrowed down to the two most successful candidates who get the most votes, and then they go on to a second round with just those top two performers. Now, this is sort of a middle ground between a system like we see in somewhere like Belgium, which always has coalitions and never has a strong government at all, and sometimes never has a government at all. And then it's a little bit like the US system, which is almost entirely a two-party system. So it's a little bit of a middle ground there. Basically, the electorate votes for who they really want in the first round, but then when their favourite candidate loses, because there are far too many candidates, then they vote for the one that they hate the least in round two. The best way I've seen it referred to in French media and across France is basically that the first round is for voting with your heart and the second round is for voting with your head, and it's actually not an awful system. Now, the last time there was an election cycle in France, it was largely between Macron and Le Pen, just like it is this time. Now, Le Pen did really well in round one and looked likely to challenge Macron, but then that all sort of got ruined in the second round as most people thought Macron to be the gross lesser of two evils, so he ended up winning by quite a fair margin. Polling right now, though, shows that Le Pen is almost on par with Macron. There has been a pretty huge swing in voters and their thoughts and their preferences over the last month or so, and so it is actually feasible that Le Pen wins not only the first round, but the second round this time round. Now, voting for that first round is going on right now. It may have actually already finished. It depends on when you're watching this video, of course. We should have the results for who won that within a couple of days now. I'm pretty sure it's going to be between Macron and Le Pen, though. It would be a really major surprise if it wasn't between those two. And then the second round of voting is going to happen in 2 weeks' time, in 2 Sundays from today. So not much space for campaigning, but there is a little bit of leeway. Now, why is this election so important? Well, firstly, just because France is actually still a very important country. It's on par with the UK in most aspects, like its population, its physical size, and its economy. It is just a little bit smaller than Germany, again, just like the UK. France is, of course, very influential in the EU, the second major country, the second major power, and actually it's tussling for the first major power a lot of the time. France is also a major military spender with one of the most impressive and effective militaries in the world. It actually has a lot of combat experience as well in sub-Saharan Africa. And this isn't just talking about France in terms of its role within NATO, but in the rest of the world as well. Now, with the war that's going on in Ukraine, of course, I don't need to explain what's going on there. We're all well aware. But Russian aggression is on full show right now. And so there's a good chance for loads of change here. Le Pen is largely seen as pro-Russian. She's always really been on the side of Russia now for many years. She's always wanted normalization with relations with Putin, and she's been quite a big fan of him. She gets quite a lot of her funding from Putin, or from Russia, not explicitly from Putin, I suppose. But Macron is not exactly perfect regarding Russia either. He has indulged Putin himself and convinced himself that he had Putin under his thumb and that he was his friend, only to have rings rung around him over recent days. Those pathetic phone calls over and over again where Macron begs Putin to end the war or to not invade, and Putin humours him on the phone call, only to turn around and do the complete opposite of what he promised Macron after Macron goes out and does a press conference. It is really, really embarrassing for Macron. He's been getting mocked incessantly by Putin and by the media as well. Now, that being said, should Le Pen actually win this election and become the next president, there could be huge impacts for Ukraine, for the war over there, and they'd probably mostly be bad. The first thing that France could do, and might do, is oppose sanctions outright, refuse to send military equipment to Ukraine, and even actively work against Ukraine, maybe even feeding intelligence to Russia as opposed to the other way around. France could also maybe roll back these sanctions that are already in place against Russia and Belarus, maybe even help Russia to avoid other countries' sanctions too. This would not be without consequence if Le Pen wins and she goes down this route though. France would, of course, get huge amounts of flack from its allies. The US and the UK in particular would be absolutely furious, as would most EU member states. But some countries like Germany would probably be silently happy to see this happen. Again, they just kind of want the war to end so that gas is cheap again and they can keep buying their blood energy. They really don't care about Ukraine at all. They just want their businesses to thrive and for things to go back to normal. Now, of course, this is a finance channel, so what might the markets make of this if Le Pen wins? Well, firstly, it's incredibly hard to know, but my instinct says the markets might actually like it, at first at least, as normalization of relations between France and Russia and the end of some certain sanctions, and maybe there's the fact that no more sanctions would be inflicted. That could be really nice for markets. Equally as likely as that, though, is the fact that tensions between France and the rest of the West would also happen at the same time, and that would be pretty awful for markets. We all know that the US has threatened those people who support Russia with sanctions, so if that came to a head with France, markets would pretty much just freak out. That would be awful for business in the first place if limitations were put in place between the US and France, and the same for within the EU and France itself. Tensions between EU member states would probably deteriorate. Maybe the EU would seek to punish France like it has done with Hungary and Poland in the past, but then France is actually a net contributor to the EU, so it's actually really important for the EU to function. It funds an awful lot of things, so maybe it stops paying its dues. Maybe the Schengen area of free travel breaks down. This is a little bit far-fetched, but it is entirely possible, and this could even result in France returning to the franc and ending European hegemony of the euro. Le Pen has been infamously opposed to globalism, and the EU is one of the most globalized institutions in the world. She opposes the EU's move to statehood, to federalize and become some sort of United States of Europe. She opposes the Brussels bureaucracy, the Eurozone itself, and the shared currency. Now, full disclosure here, I was actually opposed to British involvement in the EU, so you might think that I hate the EU, but I really seriously don't. I didn't actually vote for Brexit purely because I wasn't old enough to vote. I was 17 at the time of the vote, but I would have if I could. Now, that doesn't mean that the EU shouldn't exist though, or that it should fall apart and disintegrate. It has done pretty incredible things, and there are some very clear benefits and advantages to being in the EU. I just think that personally it was clear that the UK's desired role within the EU as just a partner and the EU's desired future as a federalised state were just entirely not compatible, so I wanted the UK to leave, despite the monetary benefits being in the EU that were provided. Now, if I supported the UK leaving the EU, why wouldn't I support France? Well, frankly, because I don't think it would be as easy for France to leave the EU. The economic hit would be far, far harder. And of course, the UK leaving wasn't easy either. Tensions were very high, there were arguments, and it looks like the EU and the UK actually became enemies for a time. But France doesn't even have its own monetary institutions or its own currency anymore, so it is so closely intertwined with European institutions, and the complete and utter free trade and free movement from France and the rest of the EU would mean leaving would be hugely impactful for almost every business in Europe, and frankly, markets would absolutely hate it if France were to leave. Again though, it would still be really quite hard to work out which way markets would be leaning, because even if Le Pen wins, that doesn't mean she's instantly going to go this direction. She may change heart, she may realise that pragmatism and France's actual role in the EU and the world is different to what she wants it to be. There is the fact that maybe Le Pen winning would reduce the risks of the war with Russia from spilling out. The cons, though, of her winning would probably overwhelm the pros, in my opinion, and over a long time frame, it would really damage Europe as a whole. Frankly, though, I'm leaning towards Le Pen winning to be awful for markets. Now, I really don't know if she will win. I have absolutely no idea. I've seen the polls. Right now, Macron is slightly ahead, but it's all within the margin of error, so it really could go either way. Something we just have to pay attention to and see how it evolves over the next couple of weeks. Anyway, that is it for the day. It is Sunday. I just wanted to get a short video out regarding this whole situation. Hopefully it wasn't too incoherent. Hopefully I made sense with my ramblings. If you liked this video, then make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to bless the YouTube algorithm. If you want more content like this, then check out our Patreon and join our community of investors. You get access to our Discord, loads of exclusive content like insight into my portfolio and buy and sell alerts for all my own investments. There's a link in the description to masterworks.io, a site that allows you to buy fractional shares of art from world famous artists like Banksy, which can be a great way to diversify your portfolio with non-market correlated assets, especially as inflation is so damn high. So if that sounds interesting, then make sure to check it out. There's also a link in the description to BlockFi, which will give you up to $250 in free Bitcoin when you use it. You can also get 9% interest on stablecoins like USDC, which is a far higher rate than you get from any savings account these days. Thank you all for watching. Stay stoic. Until next time.